Hello and welcome to the France 24 Debate. Today we're discussing nuclear energy in Japan and elsewhere after Tokyo started a return to nuclear power generation. One of the Sendai plant's 2 reactors has gone online under new safety rules following 2011's Fukushima disaster. There was a nationwide shutdown 2 years ago, but the government wants to cut fuel bills. My 2 guests today are Michael Schneider, a consultant in the field of energy and nuclear policy. He's the lead author also and publisher of the World Nuclear Industry Status Report. Hello, thank you very much indeed for coming in today.
Thank you.
Joining us from London is Jonathan Cobb from the World Nuclear Association. Hello, and thank you very much indeed for your time. I'd like to start off with you, Michael, if you don't mind me calling you Michael.
Sure.
Just how risky a move is it for Japan to restart a nuclear reactor?
Well, I think there's all kinds of procedures that happen in many countries in the world, on a regular basis. But this is a particular situation, of course. These are reactors that have not generated electricity in several years. Now, if you leave a car in the garage for several years, it's a different situation than it has been out on a daily basis. So there's specific rules to be obeyed to. And of course, after the disaster in 3/11, the 11th March of 2011, there are particular rules that have to be implemented under the new regulations issued by the government. So we have really a specific situation today, which is difficult to judge.
Okay, now turning to you, Jonathan, in London, the head of Japan's atomic watchdog says that new safety rules mean a repeat of Fukushima won't happen. But since Japan is earthquake prone, not to mention the volcanoes that could erupt at any point and also the typhoons, how can he be so sure?
I think the case is that the kind of standards that have been brought in after Fukushima as part of the new regulations that Michael referred to are in fact there to cope with some of the issues that caused the Fukushima accident. So the reactors have had to improve their waterproofing, they've had to improve their flood and tsunami defences, and they've also had to put in new power systems, backup power systems, which would mean that if there was a disruption of the normal power systems on site, they would have these backup systems available to ensure that the reactors were kept in a safe state. And I think it's important to note, just again picking on Michael's comment, these reactors haven't been in the garage and left there for a couple of years. They've been maintained constantly during that time to make sure that they are ready, with caution, to start up, as we're seeing in Sendai today.
Michael, Jonathan mentioned there the far stricter regulations, and Shinzo Abe, the Prime Minister, has said that only reactors deemed to have cleared the world's most stringent regulation standards would be allowed to restart. Is that not reassuring?
Well, I think it's of course a situation which seems to be better than what we've seen before. But, don't forget that basically you cannot replace the staff of a nuclear regulator within, a few years. Regulations have to be implemented. And if we see what kind of disastrous job the new regulator does on the actual site of the Fukushima disaster, meaning that there is all kinds of problems that are not being dealt with appropriately, and the actual cleanup is far from making the advances that we would like to see, I think there still is great reason for concern.
Jonathan, do you not agree that it might be a little bit premature for this return to nuclear power?
I don't agree. I mean, we are now 4 years on from the Fukushima accident, more than 4 years, and it's been 2 years since the last reactor was operating in Japan. So this process that has taken place to get this one reactor back to restart has been a very steady, very cautious process. And even now, during the restart, they're not rushing ahead. They're taking every care that they should do to ensure that this thing is done properly.
But there are political motivations. I mean, the government wants to cut fuel bills. Is nuclear energy really the only feasible financial option for energy in Japan?
It's a very important part of the energy mix. I mean, Japan is talking about getting basically an equal share of nuclear and all the renewables, generating just under half of the electricity in Japan by 2030. That's their target. So nuclear has a key role to play, and it is very important that Japan moves ahead and brings these reactors back online.
Michael, the government has committed to 24%, I understand, of renewable energy by 2030, and that's more than nuclear energy. Does that not perhaps in some way make up for what we're seeing today, that at least the goal is to have more renewable energy in the near future?
Well, I think what we have to realize is that, all these announcements of future shares of nuclear power seem to be, really a lot overstated when you do the reality check. Let's face it, for the time being, actually that reactor that went critical today is not even generating electricity yet. This is supposed to happen in a few days from now.
By the end of the week, they hope.
Exactly.
Yes.
So then this is one reactor. Now, this is very little.
Remind us just how many, more than 40?
Well, officially, there's 43 reactors operable, as the Jonathan Cobb's World Nuclear Association would say, or operational, as the International Atomic Energy Agency would say, or we would call it in long-term outage, because these reactors don't operate at this point. So one reactor of a lot of reactors. And it's very clear that from the process we've seen so far that, what we can expect is maybe another one restarting over the next couple of months or so, and then a long time nothing. And maybe another couple next year. Nobody knows exactly, because it's not only depending on technical issues, it's also depending on political issues. And the Japanese people, the civil society, does not want restarts. It's very clear. So what we're seeing now is a government policy, it's the utilities policy, and it's the banks that own the utilities. But this is not on behalf of the Japanese population. It's very clear.
I'd like to follow on that point about public opinion, because like you say, surveys, opinion polls suggest that most people in Japan are against restarting nuclear energy. Turning back to you, Jonathan, in Japan there's been mistrust, you could say, of all things nuclear really since the atomic bombs of 1945. When you consider that it was just a few days ago that Japan marked 70 years since those bombs were dropped, is it not insensitive timing?
Well, this is a process of restart that's been in place for some time. If the timing is insensitive, I don't think that's at all the intention of the nuclear operators who are looking to bring that plant back online. I mean, more significant maybe for the issue of public opinion. Clearly, the Fukushima accident did damage the trust that the Japanese public had in its nuclear power, nuclear energy generation.
And rightly
so.
And
that needs to be brought back. I agree, Michael. That needs to be won back again. And in a way, the restart of these reactors is the beginning of that process, because it's very hard for the industry, for the operators to say, look, we're demonstrating that we've learned from what went on, we're going to behave in a different way, we're going to be regulated in a different way, until we start seeing the reactors coming online and that learning, that new approach being put into practice. So I would think with the reactors now starting, very slowly, as Michael said, which I think people want, they want it done in a cautious way. Then as those reactors come online and that experience is shown, then we will see potentially public opinion beginning to become more positive towards nuclear again.
I think a lot of people, though, would agree that the government didn't communicate the risks properly in the aftermath of Fukushima. What reason would the public now have for believing the government when it says that nuclear energy is safe and they have nothing to worry about?
I think they're just really going to have to get the experience. This is difficult. This is a difficult situation for Japan. It's perhaps telling about how necessary nuclear energy is, that even with the current unpopularity, it is something that the parliament, the government is wanting to do. Now, politicians don't do temporarily unpopular things if they can avoid it. Clearly, there's a need here. Japan has been suffering from having to have these fossil fuel imports. It's affected their trade balance. It's had a bad economic effect. It's had a bad environmental effect because they've been burning these fossil fuels. So it's clearly something that the government feel can bring a benefit. And I think it's going to be a case that as we move forward with these reactors restarting, then we'll begin to get public opinion swinging again.
Michael, Jonathan there mentioned the impact on the environment. Is this not good news for the environment, restarting the nuclear plants?
Well, I think we have to ask the question, when we say it's good for the environment, what does it mean? Usually today we refer to climate change. So it's a question about mitigating greenhouse gas emissions. Now, the usual way to do it is to compare the nuclear generated electricity with coal-fired electricity. That doesn't make much sense, because of a lot of electricity actually that is generated or has been generated in the past can be simply saved away. The best illustration is actually TEPCO, the company that is the, if I may say, operator of the Fukushima plant. It has actually saved away, basically, the amount of electricity that has been generated by nuclear power previously from the company. So it is, TEPCO is not an example that has, used more gas or coal to generate power. Other utilities, I agree with Jonathan, yes, they did, because like the Kyushu electric power company that is now restarting Sendai, they depended on over 40% on nuclear power prior to 311. So for them, it's a different situation. But I think it's very clear what we have to ask is, per dollar, yen, or euros spent, how fast we can mitigate how much greenhouse gas emissions. If you do that calculation, nuclear is the last option that you would choose.
Okay, I'm very sorry. We've run out of time. I wish we could have discussed this for quite a few more minutes. Thank you very much. Indeed, indeed. Maybe it'll be the subject of a future longer debate. Thank you, Michael Schneider, for joining me. Jonathan Cobb in London, thank you very much indeed for your time as well. And thank you all for watching. Do stay tuned to France 24.